Welcome to the Gen Z Journey, where we work with you through an entrepreneurial lens to build a wholesome perspective on life and build both our business and personal dreams together. Join our community on Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn at Gen Z Journey. Hello and welcome to another Gen Z Journey. You're joined again for a chinwag. We've rebranded the discussions to chinwags. You're going to come here and have a proper chinwag with us. And the reason behind that is we want to teach an old dog some new tricks, and our old dog here is Joe. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah, we just changed the name. We wanted to make it kind of the rebranding a little bit more fun, and because we have a lot of fun with these discussions, boys, don't we? To be honest, that's the reason why we wanted to change it, and just to convey, that we're having fun. We're discussing interesting topics, but we are generally just having a lot of fun on these podcasts. So let's get straight into things this week. The chinwags, we're still talking about specific topics in the articles that we write each week. Obviously, the article gets released the day before on the Tuesday, and we release these podcasts on the Wednesday. So definitely go and have a read of the article always. It's so informative. It's really great fun. Aaron, again, is the author of the article this week, so that's nice and exciting. He always writes great articles. I love reading them before this podcast and just picking out some questions and really picking his brain on them before we get into these discussions. So without further ado, let's kind of get into the meat of the podcast. And the standard first question we always have, Aaron, is what was your intention behind this article, and why did you want to write it?
See, that's a little bit harder this week because the idea actually came from Rio. But I would say my intention behind writing this article roots a little bit from the fact that I myself am starting my business right now. I have the Gen Z Journey already, which is currently developing, and we consistently see barriers within our business. But some of these barriers that we're going to cover right now are more based off of what I'm facing at this moment as I start to write this business plan and really onboard my first few clients and start to figure out what I'm doing. It's very confusing and a really scary time, but also really exciting.
Oh, absolutely. And something I forgot to say, I'm going to have to edit this in, but the topic for this week is the entrepreneurship barriers that a lot of people face. And the reason why I loved that Aaron wrote this article, and he wrote it from such a personal level as well, is the fact that it has that relatability because you're going through some of those barriers right now, and that's like super cool that you're able to then share that with people. And again, I think that just has so much relatability to individuals. You're trying your best, you're seeing these barriers come up, and you want to convey that to people to say that, hey, there are difficulties you got to get through, but you'll get through them. That was the overarching message that I saw in this article, and I love that. And I think it's so true. You've got to have that mindset as an entrepreneur to really push through. I know Joe is a huge advocate for this, and I'll ask you more on that later, Joe. But did you like the topic for this week?
I loved it. Absolutely loved it. It's so resonated to our day-to-day and being an entrepreneur over 30 years and now reinventing myself through COVID-19. It just so we're on the same page.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so, okay, the first kind of main question then is in the first part of the article. The layout of the article is really cool as well. Aaron kind of lists out each different obstacle that he's faced and the barriers that he's come across, and then he really just discusses them in depth, which is, for me, lovely format, nice and straightforward, not too complicated, so I love that. And the first point you discussed was finances in a business, which is key to any business for survival or whatever. But another a mindset that I've come across towards money is abundance, and this idea of abundance related to money. So would you say that money in your business is very much related to this abundance mindset? Do you think it's believing that there's an unlimited supply, and the harder you work and the more people you talk to, the more money will find you? Or what do you think about this concept?
Yeah, so I do believe that the abundance mindset plays a role, but at the same time it doesn't. And the reason I say this is because the abundance mindset does put you in these shoes with the idea, like you said, you have infinite money out there that you can capture, and you just need to know how to capture it. And it's not to say there's literally infinite money out there, but market sizes and industry sizes are so big out there. Unless you're Apple or Microsoft or something like that, you're not going to be even getting close to covering an entire market cap. So that idea of that abundance mindset really helps you be able to understand that there is customers out there that will buy your product or service if you can actually sell it to them. But that's where I kind of bring it to the abundance mindset doesn't really play a role in your money for your business all the time. And the reason behind that is mainly because if you can't sell your product, if you don't have the skill set, or you're not able to really elevate or pitch what you're selling to both yourself and the people around you, you're not going to have that infinite source of money, because people aren't going to be willing to buy that product. And you need those customers, you need those consumers to be able to continue to develop your business.
Yeah, that's key. It just came to me actually. You can have abundance, but you got to be able to adapt and be develop the skills needed to sell the product or whatever you're doing in the industry. That's really key. I loved your perspective on that actually. Just discussing that. And Joe, I'm sure you know that that's definitely true in it. Would you agree with Aaron there?
Oh, absolutely. And what he's pointed out, believe it or not, people think that there's like only banks to go get money, you know, and which there isn't. And both of you at such an early age, understanding this process and understanding the abundance of what's out there is incredible, because in my journey, I still deal with people, and there's like, well, the bank said no, and they stop.
Mm.
Wow.
But the funny part about that is, Joe, that banks should actually be some of your last people that you really reach out to, because if you think about it, banks are mainly out there for themselves. They're out there to make that profit off of your money. They give you a loan in knowing that you're going to pay that money back with interest. Versus a lot of times, angel investors invest more in your personality and who you are, your values, what you're seeking to do, rather than necessarily the return they're going to get on their money. Their first concept of investing comes from who you are, and if you match with them, and if you can create a relationship with them, and then from there they kind of expect you to succeed, and they'll fund you. You might fail 9 times, but if this angel investor or some other investor personally invests in you, they're more likely to come fund you again a second time, even if you fail the first time, because they have a relationship with you, not necessarily your business.
And that's a little key point. Think about it. If you can convince an investor, what do you think your clientele is? So you've already got a good story. So I think you're going to become a successful company, exactly what you said, if you've got a good story. Convince everybody along the way.
I agree.
Gold nugget.
It is a golden nugget, and I feel as well that's something that me and Aaron, we've already recorded our guest podcast for this week. We normally do them about a week in advance, and the lady we've got coming on this week, I won't give out names or anything yet, because I'm excited to let you guys know who it is when we announce it on Thursday. But she spoke exactly about that, and she told us that actually that initial investment from anybody, whoever it is, whether it's friends, family, an angel investor, hopefully not the bank like we just discussed, but whoever it is initially, is like Aaron said, it's not just an investment in, I could get a return from this. It's like, okay, hopefully we'll get a return, but I'm investing in you because I see potential in your character and what you can bring to this business and what you can create from it. And it's a character boost as well. Someone going, yeah, I'm going to put down a lot of money to try and start your business. That's a huge kind of confidence boost for yourself. As someone believes in my idea other than myself, and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is and do that. So definitely a huge, yeah, very well put. Definitely, I really see you on that, Aaron. And then the The next point I wanted to talk about was strategy. Now I'm start over the past few weeks. I have to be honest. I've started to fall in love with the idea of strategy and vision and how you convey that. I think that's really key to what we just spoke about in terms of getting people behind what you're doing. You know, if everyone's for you, then and wants you to succeed, then the likelihood is that you are, right? And so I think this strategy is really key. But Aaron, you highlighted something that I was so bad at initially, not necessarily with Gen Z, but just previously, and like before, and on little side projects that I'd worked on, and that was about strategy, going into too much detail and the nitty gritty of strategy, right? So I wanted to pose that question to you. It's like how do you have strategy but not go into too much detail and not go into the nitty gritty? Like, how do you have that but not an over detailed plan? Like, how do you do that?
Definitely real. So I think one of the important things to really start to consider when you're doing strategy is that you're looking at large objectives. You want to really start with your long-term goals and see where your business is. A good way to kind of start that off is by looking at your mission statement and your vision statement and really focusing in on those and honing them to understand what your business is trying to provide. And then from there, you start to really set objectives and goals that you can meet in more the long term. And with those bigger goals, you then actually take the time to break them down into pretty much 3 or 4 subjects of how you're going to achieve a certain goal. And then within those 3, you can break it down to, another 2 to 20 tasks or something like that of how you're going to achieve it. But beyond that, you don't want to start to focus in anymore, because a lot of things are going to change. You might want to, for example, for us at the Gen Z Journey, we want to book in advance our podcast, but we don't book too far in advance because we don't know what kind of guests we're going to get in the future and what kind of people we're going to meet, and so we don't want to book too many of our podcasts in advance, because then we're booked for weeks and it's harder to get a guest on that we really want to get on. And so that idea of having enough focus to know, hey, we need to book this much in advance, we need to do these tasks to make sure we achieve our weekly podcasts and our weekly articles is really important, while not always having a list of 20 names ready to have on our podcast, because sometimes that can be overwhelming and that can actually create some kind of chaos. And we actually had a situation like that earlier, Rio, where we booked it. We out of nowhere got a whole bunch of people interested in our podcast and wanting to book, and we didn't know how to handle all those meetings. And that's what I mean by it can be catastrophic if you start planning the nitty gritty, because we were planning on having a specific amount of guests and a specific number of weeks in advance, but all of a sudden we got that inflow and it got really confusing, and we did deal with it and adapted to it, but that can always be catastrophic if you don't adapt to it early enough.
No, I totally agree with you, and I would certainly say there's very much, and I'm gonna get Joe. This is kind of like a side point, but get Joe to come in on this. I feel like there's definitely a sweet point for a lot of businesses in terms of how far ahead you want to plan and how quick you want to be to execute, because with a lot of people it's like when they just first meet you, if you give them the idea of let's do some business together, whatever it is, they want to execute on that quick. And like Joe's a huge advocate of that. He can turn stuff around so quick. I've said it before on the podcast, and that having that ability is key. But then also, like, particularly for a podcast or anything that requires a little bit more planning, which is most things, you wanna have things around about a week in advance, so that you can plan, you can make our podcast good, come up with the right questions to ask people, and really adapt to the different individuals that we bring on, for example. But then at the same time, we don't want to be like 4 weeks in advance, because then we say to the guests like, oh yeah, great meeting, love meeting you, and they're like, all right, awesome, when can I record? And then like, oh let's record in a month's time. It's like, oh, they're like, damn, I'm hyped up, I got a bunch of energy after our first meeting, and then we got to push it back. And Joe, have you found that, over the years with business, do you find there's definitely like with the catering business, for example, is there like a sweet spot for that?
There's definitely a sweet spot. Too early, too much, yeah, you lose the momentum. Do it at the last minute, you lose many opportunities. You have to find that little sweet spot, especially to keep the momentum going. And like he said, if you get them all excited and then tell them, 3 weeks from now, too many things can happen. We live in a very responsive time right now. And so, yes, there is definitely a sweet spot. Absolutely.
And I think it's also important to clarify the fact that you can plan 4 weeks in advance, but I wouldn't set something in stone that's in advance like that. You can guesstimate what's going to happen. You can have ideas. It's like forecasting the finances of a business. You want to have a good idea of where it's going, but you don't want to set those in stone. You can't make those your financials until after it's happened, right? So in that same way, you can't expect someone to be your podcast guest 4 weeks in advance when you were talking about it, and the only people that you can actually focus on right now are the first week of people that you're booking for. So you can guesstimate, but you can never do exact planning, and that's what I mean by not getting stuck into nitty-gritty details.
Yes, exactly. And not being stuck in the nitty-gritty allows for innovation as well. That's something I've realized, particularly like with our guests. We're always going to go back to the podcast examples because we want to be open and relatable to you guys in terms of, this is how we do business. And that with our guests, when we do have to put some like a bit further, like, okay, we'd like to maybe call it like 3 weeks, then we tend to come up with ideas of like, oh, we could make some more content with this person would be great here, or we tend to just create a little bit better content when we sometimes allow a bit of time with the individual and just give it a bit of thought. That's really, really huge. But before we run out of time, we've got 2 more questions left. So Aaron, in your final point, you talk about oceans. Okay, you talk about red oceans and you talk about blue oceans. Now, personally, I thought all oceans were blue, so I'm kind of confused. Could you explain this concept to me?
Yes.
You made me rush. Okay, here we go.
So,
ready?
To kind of simplify what red ocean versus blue ocean means.
Yeah, let's do it.
Red ocean is a business environment where the market is already saturated. It's a very competitive field. There's already a lot of people in that business. It's not very niche anymore. You have to invest a lot of money in a lot of the times to start up. It can also be very competitive in terms of cost efficiency and trying to be different than other businesses versus a blue ocean, just like the ocean on our planet that's very open and a lot of it's unexplored. It's the same concept. It's a vast field, a market with a lot of unexplored territory, a place where there's lots of consumer base still. There's a high demand for the product. It's usually very niche. And there's low competition, and so you don't need as much money to invest and compete in that industry. And so I talk about that in the sense that it's important that people consider when they're looking at an industry or they're looking at what they want to get into, whether it's a red ocean or whether it's a blue ocean. And you obviously want to focus on that blue ocean because it's going to be easier for you to start up with less competitors and cheaper costs for that startup. And so that's just... you always want to keep that in mind, especially if you don't have the resources. Let's say you're tight on money or don't have people backing you up and you're just kind of a solo entrepreneur. You're going to for sure want to go into that blue ocean rather than going into that saturated red ocean.
Definitely. I think that's one of the biggest things from this articles that I realize is, just really taking, because it's super easy. I always like it as well. Just get carried away by your concept or your idea or your product or whatever it is. And it's like, oh, I'm so excited about it. Let's just get straight into it. And you don't even consider like, okay, what kind of market am I getting into? And so I know from personal experience that can be super easy to just get lost in.
Definitely. And a good example from my life actually is a year ago I actually wanted to start up a sock business, and the sock industry is starting to get saturated. It's still a growing industry, but it was getting saturated, and I realized very early on that it was something that excited me. I wanted to create very unique socks for business socks as well as just casual socks. But as I started to research the industry, I realized how much control just a few major players had in that industry, meaning that there was a lot of competition with big money, as well as there was a big startup cost to being able to buy inventory and all that, and so I had to drop that business plan after working on it for a couple of weeks for that sole reason, was that it just was a market that wasn't for me to be able to enter at a cheap cost and still be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and just on that, I got a fact about the ocean. I'm sure you know this one, but it's like we've only discovered like 5% of the ocean. Did you know that? We've only like actually been to as humans.
Yeah. No, most of the ocean's unexplored. I mean, it's funny because I always talk about it in that concept, but in the concept of global warming, it's we've destroyed 70% of the Earth, but we've only really explored like less than 5% of the Earth. So, but that's a topic for another time. That's
Joe's next side project. He's just gonna buy a submarine, discover the rest of the ocean alongside doing Culinary Group solutions.
And I thought the background was very fitting for this blue ocean behind me.
He's gonna name his next business the UCG, the Underwater Culinary Group.
There you go.
My final question for this podcast is directed towards Joe. And Joe, my question is, I wanted to end on this point because I think you always refer to this, and it's how do people change their mindset towards obstacles? I think we called this article obstacles because that's what it's commonly known, but I think we don't even as a team we don't even call them obstacles anymore. But Joe, just give us a bit of insight into that. How do you approach these obstacles? How do you change your mindset towards them?
I think it becomes a lifestyle. And going back to what Aaron had said, you start off with a business plan, and a business plan is your big why. So if you keep, for what works for us, is we keep running after our big why. And we focus on the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we trying to make customers happy? Why are we so passionate about Gen Z? Why do we want to have Gen Z all over the world? Why are we so concerned with this generation to get ahead from everybody else so we can share the knowledge? That why becomes so important to us. It's a lifestyle, and we just keep focusing on that. And then what happens is the rest goes by the wayside. Yes, we'll hit speed bumps. I call them speed bumps, obstacles. But if you keep focusing on your big why that just plows through everything to get where it is, and the mindset is your why is why you're doing it. And that becomes your passion. And your passion just overflows and just starts to plow things out of the way. So I don't know any other way to say it.
Amen, brother.
Amen.
So that's, in the nutshell, that's what it is, really focused. And when you do, that's your drive, that's your passion, that's your business plan. That going back, we could sell snow to an Eskimo.
Excellent. And as Joe always says, turning negatives into positives, that's a basic principle behind it, really. But awesome. Well, that was a great podcast. It was an awesome article, a very easy one to pull questions out of. So definitely go and check it out. I wanted to make another quick announcement before we finish this one as well, and that was that we released a kind of our first YouTube content video that's not related to podcasts. And it's still related to business. I won't give away too much, but essentially we went down to Nordstrom and pretty much bought it. So that was pretty cool. So go and check out the video. It's on the YouTube channel. It'll be in the description, as always. And so you can go and find it there. But yeah, just go and check it out. Let us know what you think of the content. If you want more of it, if you don't, if you want us to do certain things, like I'm willing to get out and do whatever. I'm just really enjoying the experience of documenting people's success, and so that's exactly what we like to do here. But without further ado, we're going to finish this podcast, and so we don't overrun, and we'll see you guys all over on the Friday's podcast with this week's guest. But without further ado, let's finish as we always do.
Cheers.
Or
now. As always, head over to the Instagram and Facebook at Gen Z Journey, where you can get an inside scoop of what's going on behind the scenes, as well as seeing the exciting guests that are coming on for that week. But above all else, thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate all your participation, and we're excited you're on this journey with us. See you next time.